بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وبارك وسلم. So as we've been going through these topics, you've seen that what Imām Ghazālī rahimahullah is trying to do is he's not just talking about the fiqh of things, but rather he wants you to understand the underlying reasons, the real intention that you should have behind everything, so that you get the greatest amount of benefit out of these actions. So the next subject is about nikāḥ, or marriage. And this is not like, he's not here to tell you the fiqh of marriage or how you should get married, but rather it's, if you want marriage to be something of benefit, what are the decorum and the adab that you should have when approaching it. So he mentions a hadith that comes in the Sahih of Imām Muslim, الدنيا متاع وخير متاعها المرأة الصالحة, that the dunya is just about possessions, and not possessions in the sense that you own it, but it's about commodities, it's about items. And a mata' is that something of benefit that you acquire in the dunya, so that it benefits you in the dunya. He says the best of that which you acquire in the dunya is a pious spouse. Of all the things in the dunya that you should be trying to get, it's not the car, it's not the house, it's none of those things. But the thing that will benefit you the most is a pious spouse. Why? Because a pious spouse not only benefits you in this dunya by protecting you, helping you and assisting you, but also he or she will benefit you in the akhirah as well. And sometimes you might have a spouse that does not benefit you too much in this dunya. Right? It's mentioned from one of the awliya, from one of the wali, that he had a very difficult time throughout his life doing his own islah, meaning rectifying himself, until he got married. Once he got married, his wife gave him a lot of difficulty, and so he bore that difficulty with patience, and he treated her well despite the fact that she did not treat him well, and by that his rectification was accomplished. Now, I'm not saying that Islam says to stay in an unhappy marriage, certainly not. The Sahaba divorced, the Prophet ﷺ also had divorce, and so this is something that's definitely a part of the deen. But to understand this point, that having a spouse, and as the Prophet ﷺ said, as-salihah, a spouse that is of benefit and piety, that this is going to be the greatest of things, and sometimes you will have difficulty from this spouse, male or female, either direction. And that doesn't negate that there's benefit in that spouse. There may be a little bit of difficulty in this dunya, but the benefit will be found in the akhirah as well. So he starts off with this discussion because Imam Ghazālī is a Shafi'i. And according to the Shafi'is, there's this discussion among the scholars as to what's better. Is it better to stay unmarried and dedicate your life to studying in the deen? So studying meaning studying ilm, studying knowledge of Islam, learning Quran, learning hadith, so that you can benefit yourself and thereby benefit other people, not other knowledges, not other sciences. So if a person says, I don't want to get married, I'm going to be a doctor the rest of my life and take care of people, this is not what's spoken about here. So the discussion is it better to remain celibate and not get married and to dedicate your life to the deen, or is it better to get married even if it means that it will decrease the amount of ibadah that you can do and the amount of studying that you can do? So Imam Ghazālī is a Shafi'i, and Imam al-Shafi'i, his opinion and the opinion of the madhab is that it's better that a person not get married and they dedicate their life to the deen and a study and its propagation instead. The Ahnaf, which is the Ḥanafīs, which are the largest of the madhahib, their opinion is the opposite, that it is better to get married even if it will lead to a decrease in your ability to do ibadah. So, and there's arguments in both directions. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands, وَأَنْكِحُ الْأَيَامَ مِنْكُمْ, that marry the unmarried, or here it refers to the young women among you. So what he's pointing out is that Allah is giving a command, وَأَنْكِحُ, it is a command, get married, perform your nikah. Similarly, in Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that don't prevent the women from getting married. In other words, allow them to get married. The Prophet ﷺ said in a very famous hadith that whoever from among you is capable of supporting a spouse, then فَلْيَتَزَوَّجْ, get married. Because it is that which assists the most in keeping your eyes lowered, your gaze lowered, and keeping your private parts safe. And whoever is not able to, فَلْيَصُمْ, then that person should fast, because fasting is a way of protection. Let me speak a little bit about this hadith. That oftentimes, we sort of live in different times now. And what's different about our times is that we have brought men and women together in a way that really has never been done in the history of this ummah. Not only have they been brought together, but they've been brought together and we've dropped the other barriers. So for example, women don't cover themselves in the way that they should. Men are used to looking, and in fact they're encouraged to look. So we even have, shuyukh these days who will tell men that don't keep your eyes lowered all the time, that you feel you look weird and you're odd when you do that. And so we now exist in a time where the barriers are gone, and in fact there's encouragement instead to keep your eyes up. We also live in a time where access to haram images is beyond what has ever been, ever. The access to pornography, the access to pictures, advertisements all around us, that we have never been in a moment of history where it has been in this way. So now, if we take the literal meaning of this hadith, then we will understand it that if a person wants to protect their eyes, get married, it'll be 100% cure for it. And it won't be. Before, in the time of the Prophet, in the time of the Salaf, in the time of the generations after, where they made sure that men and women kept separate, where they made sure that people were encouraged to be pious, then it was easier to control. A person would get married and it would be taken care of. Now, just because you got married doesn't mean that your habits of looking at things on the phone will disappear. Just because you got married doesn't mean that the ads will disappear in front of your eyes. They won't. And so sometimes now we find people get married, and then after the marriage, they're still watching pornography. They're still looking at haram images. And so I get these questions from young men who have gotten married, even young women now, where they will say, I got married, but I can't give this up. What do I do? In a similar way, the Prophet ﷺ said that it is something that protects the private parts. And it does. But we have access now to the opposite gender in a way that we have never had in Islamic history. Right? We are thrown together in the workplace. We are thrown together in school. And if you don't flirt, and if you don't talk to the opposite gender, if you don't sit with them and work with them in a particular way, then it's as if there's something wrong with you. And so because of this environment, even if you're married, illicit relationships still take place. And they take place in the Muslim community. Let's not be blind to that. The fact is that you guys have aunties and uncles that you meet in the masjid and elsewhere who have had illicit relationships at work. It happens. And it happens because of the environment we're in. So simply getting married is no longer that full protection that it used to be in the past. So what this means is that the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is absolutely correct. But we need more than that for our situations and the type of people that we have become. So get married. It'll help you with the eyes and with the rest of you, but you still can't let go of the barriers. You still have to be careful how you interact with the opposite gender, whether or not there's discussion taking place that is professional and necessary, or if it's more than that. Whether or not there are images that are coming before your eyes, or sounds before your ears, that are leading you in a direction. So many times people will say, I'm fasting every single day, but yet I'm still looking at things that are haram. It's not working for me. And this is a very common thing. Especially young men will start to fast. Those who are pious and those who have a good concern, Allah has given them that concern. They will start to fast and they'll find that I'm still looking. So does fasting benefit? Does it help? Yes, absolutely. But we need more than that now. And so this is why we have to take the initiative to, if we cannot change our environments, then we have to change ourselves and protect ourselves from those environments in which we will fall into haram. The Prophet ﷺ also mentioned in a hadith that Imām Tabrani and Imām Bayhaqi mention that whoever marries, then he is indeed protected half of his iman. And so fear Allah in the other half. So marriage has that kind of benefit that when you get married, then it will assist you to be a better person, especially if you marry that al-mar'atu salihah, that you marry that pious spouse, then together you will benefit each other. If one morning you're having difficulty waking up for Fajr, the spouse will kick you and wake you up. If one day you find and oftentimes if you're sitting by yourself, then the eyes might wander. But if you're sitting next to the spouse, the eyes don't wander. Because you know she's there, or he's there, watching. And most Muslims still have a certain level of ghayrah, like this good type of jealousy, that if they see their spouse engaging with the opposite gender in a way that's impermissible, they will feel that good type of jealousy and do something or say something to stop it. So there's the dini benefit, and then there's the protection aspect of it as well, that we are protected in the dunyawi sense and in the ukhrawi sense, that the spouse will help us, assist us to become better people and to become better Muslims. So from that perspective, getting married to a pious person will protect half of your deen. Now the other half is on you. What does that mean? Is when your spouse isn't around, realize that Allah is still there. Right? When your spouse is not there to help you in your deen, realize that Allah is still there with you. So fear Allah in those moments when you are by yourself. I wanted to mention something about the pious spouse aspect. That here, the Prophet ﷺ in this hadith of Sahih Muslim made a very clear statement that the best aspect of this dunya is a pious spouse. As young men, young women, we generally want to marry somebody that is attractive. That's a really high priority for us. And I'm not saying marry the one that's not attractive. Find people that are attractive, that's okay. But understand that what's better than that is to find the pious person. Why? You guys have seen that there are actors and singers and who are the best looking people in the entire world. They will get married only to do what later? To divorce. Right? They will marry the most beautiful of people only 6 months later to divorce them or to cheat on them. And these stories are in the tabloids all the time. So simply marrying somebody who's beautiful is not going to protect you. Why? Because the nature of human beings is that when we have something nice, we get used to it very quickly. Right? A person goes out and he buys his dream car. What does he want to do in 6 months? He wants another one, a different one. And so something that is attractive in a physical sense, we get used to it. And then the attraction, as it may have brought us into it, it won't keep us there. But marrying someone pious is not like that. And when you marry somebody for their piety, then that remains. You will always look at that person with this awe and reverence that this is a person who is God-fearing. And that will be good for you. It'll be something of pleasure for you when you look at your spouse for the rest of your life, whereas beauty doesn't work that way. And not to mention the fact is that everyone gets older. So whatever beauty you may have had when you were young, it's not going to remain there 20 years, 30 years, 40 years later. And so if you came into the wedding for that reason, what are you going to do 30 years later when he or she is no longer attractive to you? But if you went into it for the sake of piety, then inshallah 30, 40 years later, that piety will have only grown. And so that which you were looking for has only increased over time rather than decreased. So the Prophet's words ﷺ are very important to keep that in mind when looking for a spouse. That the very top of the list should be piety. Do they fear Allah in their outward and in their inward? Obviously outward you can judge by yourself, but inward is more difficult. And that's what you rely upon people around that person to tell you. So for example, you're looking into a girl, so you have your sister or your mother, aunt or best friend look into that person, find out what they are like on the inside, and then they can come back and tell you that this is a pious person or not, and vice versa if you're a sister looking at a brother. A man had come to one of the scholars named Ibrahim ibn Adham. He said to him, because Ibrahim never married. He was an ascetic, he was a zahid. And he dedicated his life to the study of hadith and Quran and was a zuhud. So a man came to him and he said, "Oh Ibrahim," he said, "Tuba lak." He said, "Congratulations to you, like how good are you?" He said that you have freed up your time for the sake of ibadah. Like this is all you do. You are such a lucky person. And so he replied to him. He replied to him saying that the responsibility that you have, meaning the one who said congratulations to you, he was married. He said that the responsibility that you have to your family is better than everything that I do, meaning the totality of what I am doing. So then the man turned to him and said, well, if that's the case, what stopped you from getting married? Right? You're a pious person, you're a knowledgeable person. Here you are telling me that everything that you have done is less than what I have done as a married man. And he said, then why didn't you get married? He said, مَا لِي حَاجَةٌ فِي امْرَأَةٍ. He said, I never felt the need to get married. And so, again, remember, this is from the Shafi'i perspective. I never really felt the need to get married. So instead I gave up my life for the sake of ibadah. And that's what I was involved in. The other scholars said that the virtue of a person who has a family over one who does not have a family is like the virtue of a person who goes out for jihad compared to the one who sits at home doing nothing. And that the one rak'ah of the one who keeps a family and takes care of a family is better than 70 rak'at of the one who doesn't. Why is that the case? Because in Islam is about responsibilities. It's about fulfilling your responsibility. So if you're a wife or a husband, you have a responsibility to one another. If you're a father or a mother, you have a responsibility to your children. If you're a son or a daughter, you have a responsibility to your parents. And so fulfilling these responsibilities are of tremendous virtue and reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That the person who doesn't get married or the person who doesn't have children, they don't get that. They miss out on it. And so we see from the perspective of the deen that there is an encouragement not only from Allah but from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam that you have children. We live in a time now where every single child, what happens is people look at that child as like, what is this child going to cost me? I got to send him to Islamic school now, can't even send him to public school. I have to send him to college, I have to get him married, I have to buy him a car. And the kid's just not even born yet. They're just thinking about having children, and in their mind they're doing the math and they're like, yeah, I would rather travel than have a child. If I have a child, how am I going to go see Europe? How am I going to see Italy? So let me not have a child, not spend that expense, and inshallah we can travel the world as husband and wife instead and enjoy ourselves. You don't have to have children, right? We're not saying it's fard. The Prophet ﷺ didn't mandate it, but the Prophet ﷺ highly encouraged it because he wanted to increase his ummah, and every single believer that exists is of benefit, period. So from that perspective, the person who takes care of another, he may do less ibadah, but the value of that ibadah that he does is so tremendous, so great, that it outweighs the person who didn't get married and instead stuck with their ibadah alone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Ra'd about the messengers, وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلًا. He said, indeed, we have sent messengers before you, O Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, وَجَعَلْنَا لَهُمْ أَزْوَاجًا وَذُرِّيَّةً. And we made for them spouses and children. Meaning this was the way of the Anbiya, that they would get married. Right? Everyone will automatically think, well, what about Sayyidina Isa? He never got married. He never had children. Is he not a prophet of Allah? Is he not a great example? He is. And the fact is that when he returns, he will get married and he will have children. So he will fulfill that sunnah once he comes back. Any questions so far? So then Imam Ghazālī goes through some benefits of getting married. And I'll go through them. He says the number one benefit is having children. He said this is the main reason for getting married. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. So he says that the purpose of getting married is to have children, is to increase the ummah. And he says that when you have children, then it benefits you in 4 different ways. One is that it increases Allah's love for you, because Allah wants more believers and you are helping in doing that. So in increasing the believers, increasing mankind, that draws the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Second, it draws the love of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he too encouraged us to have more children. Number three, it increases the barakah in your life when those children become pious and they make dua for you. Right? We know that there's three things that a Muslim will benefit after their death, and one of those is a pious child. Why? Because the pious child will make dua for you after you've passed away. And if you're lucky, then your grandchildren as well, and the children of your grandchildren, and so on. So that even though you have passed away, there is a continuous line of people that are making dua for you. And every single thing that you have taught your child of good, when they do it, you get the reward for it. And if they then turn around and teach it to their children, then that is a reward for you as well. So you can only imagine that, like the Sahaba, all of the people that they taught of the next generation, and then the people that they taught of the next generation, and how their reward up until this now, where we're like 1.5 billion Muslims, that a reward of every single action that one of the Muslims are doing today is going back to them at that time. And of course the Prophet ﷺ is the root of all of that. So number three was increase in barakah. And then number four, which is, I at first thought it was an odd one to mention, but it's absolutely true, is that it increases the likelihood of intercession, of your intercession on the Day of Judgment. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ had mentioned that whenever a child dies, that child will intercede on behalf of their parents in the hereafter. So it seems like an odd thing, right? Have children so that they can die young and intercede on your behalf. I think what Imam Ghazālī means here is that nowadays it's not that common for children to die in their youth. Back then it used to be pretty common that children would die early from diseases and accidents and stuff like that. So someone should not hesitate to have children on this idea that he or she's just going to die anyway young. We have a similar thing today, right? What do people tell themselves today is that don't have children because it's going to increase pollution, it's going to increase consumption of resources. And so one of the arguments that's made to not have children is that we're already overpopulating the earth, so let's not contribute to it. But this is not what the deen teaches us. The deen is teaching us that even if there may be some perceived harm that comes about by you having a child, that the reality is not that. The reality is that child brings its barakah with it, it brings its rizq, its provisions with it, and that by having more children you're not going to cause harm. I remember one of my cousins one time said something that I found to be pretty stupid. He made this comment that we need to have measures in place in places like Pakistan and Nigeria so that we decrease the amount of children that are born. He's like, look at these countries, they're poor, they don't have money, and the poorest countries in the world, the poorest Muslim countries in the world are Pakistan and Nigeria. And so they need to have less children because they're having way too many children. And it occurred to me at the time that the two most corrupt countries in the world are Pakistan and Nigeria. So the fact that the poverty there is not because they're having children. The poverty there is that the upper class are stealing wealth and resources that could easily have gone to the population and supported them. So the solution is not to have less children so that the upper class can live better and be more corrupt. It's to eliminate that corruption so that everyone can live in a good way. So that was the first benefit, was having children. The second benefit is it protects you from shaitan. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Man nakaha faqad hassana nisfa dinihi." And this is another narration similar to the one that I had mentioned, that whoever gets married, then he has protected half of his religion. So fear Allah in the other half. And so what is this referring to? Is the shaitan who comes and he whispers and he says, oh, look at her. Or, why don't you look at these images? Why don't you watch that video? Why don't you do this and that? So one of the protections, or one of the benefits of getting married, is that it protects you from the whispers of the shaitan to do these things. The third benefit is that marriage allows you to relax. Tarweeh literally means like a pastime. So what he means by that is that with your spouse, you have somebody to relax with. You have somebody to unwind with. You have someone to de-stress with. And so you can come home from difficulty, or if you've been home all day, then the spouse comes home and then you can sit for a time and you can unwind and you can unstress, and that is benefit for the person. Why is it beneficial? Is because in those moments of unstressing, de-stressing, it allows you to refresh, so then you can fulfill your responsibilities better. I have to tell you, in my lifetime, I've had a couple of friends. If you ever find a married man spending a lot of time outside, there's problems at home, right? That guy you always used to hang out with, then he got married, then you didn't see him for 6 months, then you started seeing him again. He's like, hey man, let's hang out. Oh yeah, we should go do this. If he's coming back out, there's problems at home. This has been the general thing that I've seen. I used to have a really good friend, mashallah, a really good brother. He started having problems, and the way I knew it, I was in Philly at the time, is that I would just be driving through Philly and I see him on the streets. And he didn't have a car, so he just walk everywhere, take the bus everywhere. And so I pull over, pick him up, and just randomly in North Philly, I'm driving and I see him again. And I'm like, all right, something's wrong. You shouldn't be outside the house for no reason. If you have free time, you should be at home. Instead, he's attending this halaqah and that halaqah, which normally is a good thing. But a person who normally wasn't attending halaqat, and now all of a sudden he's attending halaqat, mashallah, maybe he's benefiting and he's growing, but that's also another issue. Perhaps he's having issues at home. So of the third benefit is that it allows the heart to seek comfort and to relax and to gain the strength for doing more ibadah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَجَعَلَ مِنْهَا زَوْجَهَا لِيَسْكُنَ إِلَيْهَا, that He has made from among them wives or husbands, spouses, so that you can relax with them, so you can get sakina with them. This is one of the purposes of getting married. It comes in a narration that the intelligent person will have 3 moments. The first moment, so we'll say 3 moments in his day, 3 times that are allotted in his day. So the first moment is that he keeps for his Rabb. He says, yunaji fiha rabbah, that in that time period that he's allocated, he's speaking with his Rabb. It could be ibadah, it could be dhikr, it could be dua, but he has a time that he's dedicated that's for him and his Rabb. And then the second time is where he does muhasabah of himself. He takes himself to account. So many of the shuyukh mentioned that at the end of the day you should take a few moments and you should take yourself to account. What did I do today? So if you found that you did something that you shouldn't have, then you take yourself to account. Why did you do this? You wasted all this time doing something that is impermissible. Why did you do that? You were supposed to recite Quran today and do your awrad and your adhkar. You didn't do it. Why did you miss it? So to take yourself to account. That if you do that every single day, it is of tremendous benefit. And then the third moment is that moment in which he spends for his needs. That could be eating, that could be drinking, and that also includes spending time with the spouse or the family. So 3 moments every single day. The fourth benefit is that it frees up your time from having to do other responsibilities. For example, if you're a single parent, it's difficult. You have to take care of kids, you have to take care of the home, you have to buy your own groceries, you have to do all of the work inside the house, and then oftentimes you have to do everything outside the house as well. So if you have other people that you need to take care of, parents, you need to go take care of them. If you have to earn money, you have to go and earn money. And so your responsibilities are tremendous, and it becomes very difficult to live your life or to do other things like the ibadah of Allah. Whereas if you have a partner and you have a spouse, now you can divide that work up.
Right? Some things need to be taken care of outside the house. I'll take care of it. Stuff inside the house, you take care of it. Your parents are sick. I'll go check them out today. You can go check them out tomorrow. We have children. Why don't you take care of some aspects of them and I'll take care of other aspects of them. So then you have time for ibadah and other things, and she or he have time for the other things as well. So it frees up the heart to engage in other responsibilities. And so he says that a pious spouse, he says, صالحة والمصلحة, one who is pious themselves and they cause piety in other people. That is, it is of tremendous benefit for the deen when you do it in this particular manner. Another scholar mentions that a pious spouse is not from this dunya. And this goes along with what I had mentioned in the beginning, that a pious spouse is not from this dunya. That instead, they are somebody who free you up for the akhirah. Make sense? Right? They free you up for the akhirah, means that they have freed up your time from the worldly things, because they will take care of some of it, so that you can have your time for the akhirah, meaning your ibadah as well. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead. Yes. So the question is that if a child dies early, does it also refer to the miscarriages? And it does also refer to the miscarriages as well. So it comes in a hadith of that as well, that some of the Sahaba had come to the Prophet ﷺ mentioning that they had lost a child. And there's some fiqh aspects to it, but yeah, any miscarriage that occurs sort of later on where the child would have been viable, that loss to that fetus will appear as a child on the Day of Judgment to intercede on behalf of the parents. Go ahead.
So I guess when it comes to the benefits and the khair of marriage, is most of that still, I guess, present when it's like, for example, like if you get married at a younger age where you guys aren't, well, you and your spouse aren't living together, and maybe it's like you don't see each other as much as like if you were to like live together and like you got married at a later date. Is there still like barakah reward in that too?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is that is there still the same reward? Is there still the same amount of benefit when you're not living together? And it is. That it's better to be in person. Obviously, the full benefit will be while you're in person living together. But even if you're separated, there's still communication, and then there's still this idea. That same friend of mine who I used to see on the streets walking when he had difficulty, he told me something that was really insightful, and he said that of all the people of all the religions in the world, Muslims are the only people that are faithful to their spouse before they even know who they are. Right? It's easy to be faithful after you're married, but to be faithful even before you're married, meaning don't commit zina, don't look at another woman, don't look at another man for the sisters, to keep your eyes lowered, to protect yourself, to be faithful in the way that people today are only after they're married. Muslims are like that before marriage. And so it reminded me, because even though you're married, even though you may not be living together, but you're married, the benefit of keeping the eyes lowered, that reminder to you that I'm married and I shouldn't be doing these kind of things. Not that you should be doing it if you weren't married, but it assists more in that way. And then the barakah and the tawfiq that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives in increasing your provision and giving you barakah in your wealth and your time, that occurs after you're married, even if you're not living together. Go ahead.
When you were speaking about excuses that people have to not have children, is it somewhat like, and I've heard that people are like afraid to have children that because of like the fitna of not today. Like if I raise a child, I don't want them to go off some off path. I don't trust myself to raise them properly. What would you like?
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion. So the question is about not having children because you don't want them to become off the path. If you read the books of fiqh, the scholars mention that it is impermissible for a Muslim to have children in non-Muslim lands. What kind of land do we live in? It's a non-Muslim land. It is. There's no question. No one would look at America and say it's a Muslim land. It's a non-Muslim land. So in times before, Muslims only lived in Muslim lands. And the only time that they would go to non-Muslim lands was to trade or for some temporary benefit that they were trying to accrue. So they would go, they would stay there for a month, 6 months, a year, a couple years, and then they would come back home. It was never seen as a place that they resided in. It was never home to them. It was always a place that you just visited. So the scholars said that while you're visiting those places, don't have children, because we don't want your children to be raised in that particular environment. Because if you raise them in an environment that's not an Islamic environment, then the chances of them becoming murtad, leaving the deen, or even taking on aspects that are un-Islamic, where they're no longer considered to be salih, they're no longer considered to be pious, is much greater. So if one wasn't careful and they read the books of fiqh and looked at us today, we would say that none of us should have children. In fact, in a generation, Muslims should become extinct in the non-Muslim world. So obviously I'm not telling you not to have children, right? What I want you to understand is that the scholars, they've always had this strong emphasis that you need to protect Iman. You need to protect Islam. And so if you ever find yourself in a situation or in a place where your Iman and your Islam is in danger, then you need to take steps to protect that. You need to be very conscious of it. So as Muslims living in a non-Muslim land, we have to be very conscious of this fact, that we are living in a land where Iman and Islam can slip away very easily. So that doesn't mean don't have children. That means be even more careful about having children. So have children, because we still want to increase the ummah. But when you have those children, you need to be very careful. You need to take steps. You need to protect it. Right? When COVID happened, what do we see people doing? Put on masks, shields, wear multiple layers. Some people I saw wearing like 3 masks on top of each other when they went like grocery shopping. 3 masks and a shield. And even till this day, you'll find some people who are like taking a walk outside. I'm talking about now in 2024, almost 2025. They're outside by themselves with a mask on. Why do they go to that extent? Why do they continue to, some of them go to that extent? Is because they're trying to protect their health. Logically, it makes no sense. You're sitting in your car by yourself and you've got a mask on. Why? But it makes no sense, but you understand the emotion behind it. The emotion behind it is that I'm so concerned about my health, I am willing to take the extra step, go the extra mile to make sure that I don't get sick. A Muslim's iman should be like that. That you should have multiple layers of protection for your iman and the iman of your children and your family, and do that. So to answer your question, if someone were to say that I'm not going to have children because I don't want them to turn out unpious, then if that is the environment that you live in and you're unable to protect your children, the solution is not to not have children. The solution is take the steps to protect them, or move to those places where you can protect them. Any other questions from sisters? So another hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, Imam Tirmidhi narrates this one, and he says that let each one of you have a few things. Each one of you should have a heart that is grateful. قَلْبًا شَاكِرًا, a heart that's grateful. وَلِسَانًا ذَاكِرًا, and a tongue that is always in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَزَوْجَةً مُؤْمِنَةً صَالِحَةً, and a spouse that is a believing, pious person. تُعِينُهُ عَلَى آخِرَتِهِ, and they help you in your akhirah. So here, again, just to make that point that the Prophet ﷺ is making and Imam Ghazālī is making about nikah, is that the Prophet ﷺ said, Zawja mu'mina, a Muslim spouse. And here, if you know your Arabic, he's speaking about a woman. So he's telling men, because men are generally the ones who sat in front of the Prophet ﷺ, so the advice is being given to the men that marry zawjatan mu'minatan. Can a man marry a non-Muslim? Yeah, he can, right? He can marry a Jew or a Christian, a proper Jew or a Christian. It's permissible. But here in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ is emphasizing, yes, Allah has given you that permission, but it's better for you, in the same way that you should have a grateful heart and a tongue that remembers Allah, marry a woman that is a Muslim. That this will be of tremendous more benefit for you in the akhirah. In addition to that, he puts another adjective, salihatan, that being a believer is not good enough, but find one that is pious as well. So again, I'm harping on the same point, but let me say it again, that just because you found a Muslim is not good enough. That's just the first step. So don't marry somebody just because they're a Muslim, but marry them because they're a pious Muslim. That's what you want to be looking for. And I'm mentioning this to you guys, especially the young men, because I've had so many young men whose minds have been clouded by some beautiful woman that they start making excuses for her deen. You know, right now she hangs out with all the guys, but after we get married she'll stop. You know, right now she dresses inappropriately, but after we get married she'll stop. He's found the mu'minah, he's making excuses for the salihah, hoping that she'll change later. Women do the same thing. They marry a guy, find him attractive, there's something about him that they really like. Oh, you know, when he gets married, he'll settle down. He won't be talking to the other girls. Once he gets married, yeah, he'll grow out his beard and he won't do X, Y, and Z. And so it's the same thing, that you're hoping that he will be someone other than he is up until this point, instead of finding that person who's pious. And then the fifth benefit that Imam Ghazālī mentions is, he says, the striving and the working in taking on the responsibility of your family, of your spouse, of your children. That this is a benefit. We look at it as hardship. Oh man, now I gotta take care of this kid. I've already got, 5, I have to have a 6th one now. Or, I don't want to get married yet. I'm too young. I don't want to have to look after somebody just yet. And so Imam Ghazālī is mentioning that in that there is tremendous benefit, because in establishing and fulfilling the rights of another is great reward. In having patience over the habits and characteristics of other people, even the best of people, you're going to have to be patient with them every now and then. So that patience is rewarding. And every now and then, even the people that love you the most will cause you some difficulty. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not intentional. And for you to bear that is something of great reward, especially if it's coming from your own family. And then all the reward in feeding them halal food, in guiding them in the right path. For those people that you are responsible for. The Prophet ﷺ, he said in a hadith that ala kullukum ra'in wa kullukum mas'ulun, that each one of you is responsible. Each one of you will be asked about those you are responsible for, meaning on the day of judgment. And so it's a huge responsibility, but for the people that fulfill that responsibility, there is tremendous reward that comes with it as well. In another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, this one narrated by Imam Tabarani, he said that there will be a day where the one who took care of others in a just way, وَالٍ عَادِلٍ أَفْضَلُ مِنْ عِبَادَةِ سَبْعِينَ سَنَةً, that person, a day in the life of that person who took care of people in the best of ways is worth more than 70 years in worship. A day versus 70 years in worship. And then Imam Ghazālī mentions that the one who busies himself in perfecting himself or rectifying himself is like the one who busies himself, the one who busies himself in rectifying himself and others is not like the one who busies himself in rectifying himself alone. Right? So the one who's only worried about himself but not worried about his family, those two are not the same. meaning the one who fixes himself. So he himself goes to the masjid. He himself prays 5 times a day. He himself is pious. But in the meantime, his wife or her husband and the rest of the children are not. Those two are not the same. And this too, again, I don't mean to say it so that you judge people, but I mean to say that to make sure that we don't fall into that. That it's common that you find people who they themselves are very pious, but you look at their children and they're not. Or you look at their spouse and they're not. Right? The man himself is in the masjid 5 times a day. He walks around in a jubbah and does all of this stuff, but in the meantime, the children are like the exact opposite. Obviously, we can't make people be good. So there may be children, despite your best efforts, that they turn out in a way that you don't want them to. Right? The hearts are in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not in ours. But in general, a person who spends the time from the very beginning, makes the environment one of piety, then in general, that family and those children will turn out pious. But the one who doesn't care and he only worries about himself, and in the meantime he's sending off his family into all of the haram environments and without any protection for their iman, that person hasn't benefited those people.
How can you ruin your marriage? It says, among the ways to ruin your marriage is that you don't seek out that which is halal. Meaning you don't feed your family halal. You're not worried about what kind of job you have, whether it's permissible or not. You're not worried about where your money is coming from. You're not worried about what you're buying with that money. If you're earning haram and you're spending haram and you're bringing home haram, then that is a way of destroying your marriage. It says on the day of judgment that a person who feeds haram to their family, that the family will take their qisas, like their revenge, from their husband or their spouse. That you fed us haram in this dunya, and because of that, this happened. Or you fed us haram, and because of that, it affected my deen. You fed us haram, and we had no other food to eat, and so we sinned by eating that haram. That they will hold that person responsible for it on the day of judgment. So imagine that situation where in the day of judgment your family turns against you rather than being of benefit to you because you did injustice to them by not treating them in the way that they had the right to be treated. They were put under your responsibility and you didn't fulfill that responsibility. And then I'll stop with this one statement that after going through this kind of back and forth of should you get married or should you just do ibadah? And I think from the perspective of the Hanafis, the strongest argument that they have that getting married is more important than doing extra ibadah is that the Prophet ﷺ got married. The Prophet ﷺ could have dedicated his entire life to ibadah, and it would have been unlike any other person, and it is unlike any other person. He could have dedicated his whole life to da'wah and tabligh, but he didn't. He got married, he had children, he fulfilled those responsibilities. Can we even imagine that the Prophet ﷺ, if he hadn't gotten married, he would have done something haram, or the eyes would have looked at something impermissible? No, can't even imagine. It would never have happened. So even though marriage was not something that he needed, he did it anyway. So let alone people like ourselves who need it, or even if we don't need it, we should still follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ of getting married. So from the perspective of the Hanafis, the one person who should not get married is the one who knows that if they get married, they are going to infringe upon the rights of their spouse. Right? There are some people who have no control over their anger, or they're abusive by nature. And they come to the realization that I cannot have a relationship without abusing the other person, whether it be verbal or physical. Some people just don't have that control over themselves. They haven't developed that control yet. So while they are like that,
if they know for a fact that if they get married, they're going to harm the other individual, it's better that person not get married. It's better that person not get married. And not just the men, right? Women can be abusive as well. And so in the same way, if a woman knows that she's going to end up abusing her husband, it's better that they not get married until they fix themselves. So their attention should be towards, let me get my anger under control. Let me get myself under control so that I don't cause harm to this individual, with the intent of getting married afterwards. Any questions about all that? From sisters, any questions?
So, I guess with that statement that you shouldn't get married if you violate the rights of your spouse, does it also include the right of the spouse, I guess, like the right to provide for her and all that too? I'm guessing that counts too, right?
Well,
like the spouse's right to like have, I guess.
yeah, I see where you're going with it,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the responsibility for a man of marriage is to support the wife.
Yeah.
So that has to be taken care of, right? You can't get into it and not be able to do it. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be able to do it. Meaning, if there's someone else, like a parent or someone else who steps up and says, I'll take care of it, you live in my basement, then you're covered from that perspective, right? If a father says, yeah, live in my basement, you can still have dinner with us like you normally do, +1, then there's no reason that you need that 2-car garage, a picket fence, 2 cars, one for her, one for me, enough money to travel to Italy once a year and Disney the other time of the year. Like, that's irrelevant. That's not necessary. But the bare minimum, then yeah, that is a responsibility on you, so you should have at least that much to do. Or someone else is covering it for you. Any other questions? So let's bring this back, sort of, because I know when it comes to nikah, that we can oftentimes get sidetracked to the other things that we think about. The purpose of the Iḥyā, when it's speaking about nikah, is that you go into the marriage with this intent that it benefits me in the akhirah. How is a person going to do that? Number one, they're going to find the spouse that will benefit them in the akhirah and in this dunya from the perspective of their deen, which means protecting the eyes, protecting the rest of the body, and assisting them in becoming better Muslims. So then when a person is in that nikah, then in the same way what we spoke about, when you're fasting, what should be your thought? When you're praying, what should be your thought? When you're in the nikah, what should be your thought? And your thought should be completely Islamic centric. That yes, there are many benefits to marriage, but the center point of it is still around Islam, is still around your khushu' in a sense in your nikah, in your marriage. So to like complete that analogy, when we speak about khushu' in the salah, we speak about a salah in which a person realizes they are standing before Allah, and their attitude and their being during that entire prayer is one, that I am standing before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When a person is in nikah, then that entire lifespan, or whatever number of years that you spend in that nikah, should be of one where the person is present in a way that this is of benefit to my Islam, this is of benefit to my akhirah, and not lose track of that. Right. Any questions from the sisters? All right, inshallah, we'll stop here. One other thing, I'm traveling for the next 2 Wednesdays. So next Wednesday, I'll send a recording. I mean, technically, I could make it, but I'd literally be leaving from here and then going to JFK. So most likely I'll record it. If I do decide to come in person, I'll let you know a couple days beforehand. And then the Wednesday after that, I should, inshallah, be in Medina, Munawwara. And my plan is to do class from there. So what I'll try to do is set up a Zoom session where we can just do it live from there. But depending on the timing and however it turns out, if it's not possible, then I'll just record it and send it to you guys from there, inshallah. And then after that, we'll just continue. When does the semester end for you guys?
Mid-December.
Mid-December?
Yeah.
Okay. So then somewhere in December we'll decide whether or not we'll just continue online as like a Zoom thing, or if I'll just send recordings, or if there's enough people around we can just meet up at maybe MCMC or some other place and we can continue it there. I think that was it. Okay. All right, inshallah. Jazakumullahu khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.